Welcome to part 4 of the AmaiHito Endorphin Gymnastics Training Camp. You should now have a nice string of back handsprings that accelerate. And now what we want to do is have the character jump up in the air and do a nice high backflip. In order to do this, we need to put another sit pose at the end of our string of back handsprings. But we also need the character to not over-rotate. We want the character to have their hips directly over their feet. Before we wanted the character's feet to be in front of their hips, we now want their feet to be under their hips. We also want the character's feet to be flat against the ground when the character jumps up in the air. As you can see, the character jumps a lot higher when its hips are directly over its feet and it doesn't jump as far back. The key is to getting your character to jump high up in the air and do a backflip. And with this scene, the way that I'm teaching you guys to do it, the character should be able to jump up in the air, keep its back arched for about half of a flip, and then naturally just swing its body over, and it should bring its feet to the ground. And you can see here, I'm just kind of tweaking the placement of the sitting pose. And what I'm actually going to do here is, because I want the character's feet to be flat against the ground, I'm going to change the last sit pose so that the character's toes are curled up. I locked the lower legs and I just selected the tips of the feet and rotated them back. So now when the character's feet touch the ground, they're going to be flat against the ground sooner than a regular sit pose. And as you can see, the character is now jumping higher into the air and also flipping over further. Again, the feet are directly under the hips. There's a straight line between the hips and the feet. And as you can see here, the feet are in front of the hips, and that's what gets the character to flip over backwards. Again, the feet are in front of the hips. The feet are in front of the hips to get the character to go backwards. I cannot stress how important that is to keep in mind. Even if you want to do whip backs, you need to get the character's feet in front of their hips if you want the character to continue flipping over backwards. If you want the character to go up, the feet need to be under the hips directly. And as you can see, the character flips over pretty far with the active pose. And then the active pose ends, the character just naturally swings its feet over as its body's relaxing out of that arch pose. And it finds its way to its feet. One of the things that you should try to avoid is having the character's feet slide against the ground when it's jumping off. That robs you of height, rotation. In certain cases, the character just won't even flip over. And a good little tip to have is reducing the strength of the last pike down pose and start the sitting pose a little bit early so that the character doesn't flip over quite as far. And also the character tucks its legs under itself, but still doesn't rotate to the point that its hips will be past its feet when it starts to jump. And also a good tip is to have a space between the sitting pose and the last arch pose, because this allows the character's body to relax a little bit and then just launch itself into the air. Also having the last sit pose at a very low strength. Some of my scenes I'll use a 0.5 strength on that last sit pose. And the character will just launch itself into the air and then flip over very easily. To get the character to land, we just take one of the regular sit poses, copy paste it, move it over to the end. Then we just tweak it for a bit to get the character's feet coming to the ground. One of the ways that you can, if your character is over rotating, you can just shorten the active pose just a little bit to see if you can get it to not flip over quite as far. You can also lower the strength so it's not jumping quite as high and doesn't have the opportunity to flip over quite as far. And you want the character to land with their, in this case, the character's hips are a little bit behind their feet. But you just want the character to have its mass distributed evenly over its feet before it stands up. Right now I'm just making a standing up pose. And from then on, you're just tweaking the last two poses to get the character to stand upright. The next video is going to cover how to make your character twist. Right now, if you have a nice high back flip where the character just naturally whips its feet over to the ground after, I guess, its chest is inverted and vertical, then you can just have the character tuck its body around, pike its body, and it'll just double flip over. See you next video.